Hello and welcome to VR Vertigo. So we've just had the VR Games Showcase, which should at some point in the very near future start playing on the screen behind me. Now the Games VR Showcase is a very small affair, but very nicely done. It doesn't indulge in fluff, but rather just gets straight to the meat of the subject, which is the games. It gives you a little bit of preamble as it introduces the games and swiftly moves on. Now, my particular interest in VR is with the PSVR2, Sony's headset offering. And typically in these showcases, we find that the PSVR2 is, in my opinion at least, underserved. For a global company like Sony Interactive Entertainment to have a headset and be so, how can I put this, timid about the headset, has been and is unacceptable. And the various offerings we've had from the various showcases over the last few years have left us all a little bit cold. There have been some notable moments, however, and those moments still stand proud, Hitman being chief among them. Also, Forza. And if we take those highlights and transplant them directly onto what we're looking at now, the 2026 Spring Showcase, then we've got at least a little something to be excited about. Chiefly was the game that we just saw being played, the Payday VR version, which is, in my opinion, long overdue. So all in all, PSVR 2, not great, but not bad. But what was bad? I mean, bad again, in my opinion. The plethora of cartoony games that have no, or appear on the face of it at least, to have no real depth to them. We've got all kinds of jokey, cartoony games on display with twee little soundtracks. That one, when looking upon the trailer, thinks, well, that'll be good for 5 minutes, and then you'll never revisit it. We've got far too much of that in the ecosystem. And whereas these small cartoony games do have their place, there's something that VR has had hanging around its neck as a weight, which has not improved with each VR showcase that comes along, and that is the cartoony games. Because what we've got is a juxtaposition of a really pricey headset and games that your 9-year-old kid would be happy playing. The math doesn't add up. And so where does that leave us? The users of a beleaguered but still undeniably good headset, the PSVR 2. Since I started this channel, I've been banging on about the fact that Sony needs to start making its back catalogue of flat-screen games available to the PSVR 2 user. And no matter how unlikely that was to happen, it needed to happen. Because you could bet your bottom dollar somebody else was going to turn up and do it. To wit, I give you the Steam Machine, and of course the Steam Frame VR headset. That console stands to take away everything that I was just about to say Sony had worked so hard for. But we know that Sony hasn't worked that hard for anything. It appears as though they've done the bare minimum, and they're about to reap the rewards of that. Because if Steam Frame can compete at all in the headset playing games, PSVR 2 has just lost everything. The Steam back catalogue is too much of a tempting offer not to indulge. And as sleek and as polished as the PSVR 2 headset is, the Steam Frame, as we perceive it now, rough and ready as it currently is, stands to take the title. Sony has just taken an axe to another studio, and there are rumours that Bungie might be next. And one can't help but wonder if the PSVR 2's head isn't also on the chopping block. Because the same rules apply for flat screen gaming as they do for VR. If it's not performing, then it's out the door. And like most large companies, Sony will cut off whatever flesh it needs to in order to survive. But wait, I hear you cry, isn't the Steam Frame games console also a PC? And don't we have a PC adapter for the PSVR 2? No, surely not. Surely there's no way that the PSVR 2 can plug into the Steam Frame when it's switched to PC mode.
Really?
Because if that were to happen, if in some way, shape or form Sony looked at the Steam Frame and thought,
We could make another adapter for that.
And if they can do that, if they do that, then they will have potentially saved their own sorry ass. PlayStation can still remain, at least as far as the headset is concerned, king of the castle. And the PSVR2 users, instead of having to go to the expense of buying a PC, can potentially still buy an expensive bit of kit in the Steam machine, but at a lower price point than a PC. Voila! The entire Steam back catalogue playable on the PSVR2 via the Steam machine. Now, I know that there are dissenting voices looking at this video thinking, what the fuck is he talking about? But what if? Nobody thought we were going to get a PC adapter for the PSVR2, and yet here we are. How different is the architecture going to be inside the Steam machine? We already have the PC adapter. How much more work would it take to reprogram it slightly for the Steam machine? Now, I know this is all speculation, but Sony, as I said, have been doing the bare minimum, and that PC adapter to help save the headset that they'd invested heavily in was the bare minimum. Why wouldn't they do that for the Steam frame? Do they need Steam's permission? Certainly Steam wouldn't readily go into some kind of agreement with Sony for the PSVR2 because they have their own headset. But there's nothing to stop Sony from developing a generic piece of hardware that just happens to plug into the Steam frame. Would Steam then reconfigure their internal architecture to lock Sony out? It's all speculation and it's all interesting. But one thing's for sure, with the introduction of Steam machine and the Steam frame, the console headset wars have just begun. Do let me know what you think in the comments below. Do like, subscribe and share the channel. It really would help. And until next time, bye-bye.